Get started. A very welcome to all for this session. We have 3 presentations in this session on crop performance and nutritional quality. The first one is Erick Boy. He is head of the nutrition at the HarvestPlus in Washington, D.C. He is a Guatemala-trained medical doctor with a master's and a doctor's degree in nutrition from UC Davis. Before joining HarvestPlus as head of the nutrition unit in 2008, he worked for 10 years at the Institute for Nutrition of Central America and Panama. He'll be presenting a talk. Originally, it was scheduled as Advances in Plant Breeding of Staples for Combating Hidden Hunger. I guess the title is a little bit changed. It says Progress in Biofortification of Staple Crops, especially to address hidden hunger. And I must say, HarvestPlus was the one which actually coined the word biofortification and hidden hunger. So Erick will be mostly looking at what's happening with these biofortified crops, which are products of plant breeding, when they're being applied and being tested in various parts of the world. So Erick, please.
Thank you for that kind introduction. And good afternoon to you all, and thank you for coming and enduring so far. If you are as wired up as I am with all the coffee I've taken, you'll do well through this session. The topic I want to share with you this afternoon is really a summary of the HarvestPlus program in biofortification of staple crops. So it is a little bit of background on biofortification a la HarvestPlus, which focuses on conventional plant breeding and some agronomic practices. And then some of the key results and latest results in nutrition research of these biofortified crops as they are released into the target countries. And finally, a brief summary of progress to date on dissemination of the released varieties around the world. So biofortification is really an evidence-based intervention that links agriculture with nutrition. It is one of those few examples that actually link the two fields that have acted in parallel throughout history, but hopefully not for a long time in the future. So biofortification is also, it is a complementary measure to control hidden hunger or micronutrient deficiency. It's not a cure-all intervention. It has to act in synchrony with commercial point of use or point of use fortification, supplementation, and the end result of all nutrition interventions, I would like to remind everyone, and as we conceive it as well, is dietary diversity. People have the right to have a diverse diet, and because that takes a long time and real improvement in the socioeconomic conditions of a population, then biofortification is one of those other interventions that when put together to answer to the specific, context-specific problem with the right mix of intervention, then it will work well in tandem with the others. Biofortification is a means to increase the concentration of key micronutrients, focusing our efforts in provitamin A, iron, and zinc, 3 of the 4 most prevalent micronutrient deficiencies in the world, without any punishment on agronomic characteristics that farmers want to see in those varieties that they adopt. So if we develop a variety of sweet potato with a lot of provitamin A, but it doesn't have a good yield, farmers won't take it. So we are aware of that, and the varieties that are released in countries have to have high concentrations of the target nutrient plus a comparable or better yield than the conventional varieties that the ones that we release are supposed to replace. Biofortification from its beginning focuses and has a niche amongst the rural population that lives from subsistence farming and produces and consumes, by definition, the staple crops that are grown in their fields. According to ex-ante analysis and some of the data that is coming out as we disseminate the crops in the countries, biofortification is a cost-effective intervention because most of the research and development, or all of the research and development investment is upfront, and it is provided by donors. And then once the product gets delivered to a country, it is done as a public good. So it has no IT involved, and therefore it is more sustainable. So how do we know that biofortification works? Well, first of all, we have to demonstrate that plant breeding can get, and agronomic and management can get the levels of the nutrients up to a certain level that consuming these crops will generate a measurable biological impact in the population that we are serving. And second, once we prove that these crops have enough of the nutrients after they are processed and stored and cooked to produce such an effect, then will the farmers adopt them? Will they like the yields? Will they like the culinary characteristics of the product? So we have to prove that at least these two factors are in place to be reassured that biofortification as a tool will work. So regarding the first point, plant breeding has demonstrated, and I want to thank all plant breeders for doing this, that we can achieve levels of provitamin A, zinc, and iron in staple crops that will provide, according to the initial discussions that plant breeders and nutritionists had back in 2003, can provide about 30% of the estimated average requirement of iron for populations that consume the iron crops as staples in high quantities, about 25% of the requirement of zinc, and about 50, if not more, percent of the requirement for vitamin A. These are the revised nutrient targets, and the only one that really changed after all the research that we've done is zinc, and mostly because the zinc, the recommendations for zinc intake and zinc requirements were moved up by our advisory technical group. We were using a value that was too low, and therefore our target was 40% of the requirement, and now it's reduced to 25% because that's what plant breeders tell us that they can get, and no higher than that. But so far, we've been able to achieve these target levels in those crops that you see depicted on the horizontal axis. And the process we follow to validate these target levels is shown in this graphic. After development of the varieties or the lines that have the required level of the nutrient, then the research collaborators, which are researchers from all over the world, they go ahead and measure intake by the population in the target country, the retention of the nutrient after processing, post-harvest processing and storage, and then and cooking, and then how much of the nutrient left in that food is absorbed and used by the body. So if we prove these three basic tenets or assumptions that went into the target levels, then we move on to evaluation of the product in terms of the efficacy to generate a positive change in nutritional status among the target population. And in the case of biofortification, our target population groups are children under 5 and women of childbearing age, non-pregnant, non-lactating, because lactation and pregnancy increase the daily nutrient requirements too much for biofortification. Really. And if the efficacy trials, which are very controlled trials and the gold standard for proof of concept, produce positive information or data, then we move up to effectiveness trials, to testing or evaluating how much of a change the consumption of the crops produces in non-controlled market conditions, for instance. And that is done in parallel with scaling up or dissemination at the national scale. So we have, or our collaborators have done all of the bioavailability testing for all of the 7 primary crops, which are maize, cassava, sweet potato, rice, wheat, pearl millet, beans, and that's it. And so they have done all of the bioavailability testing in humans. So we moved beyond the testing in Keiko 2 cell models or animal models and have done the testing in humans. And there is a review that was published in 2015 of the evidence for mineral crops and provitamin A crops. So I'm presenting just summary graphics here. So for the provitamin A crops, maize, sweet potato, cassava, we can see that the bioconversion ratio from beta-carotene or provitamin A carotenoids to retinol, which is the form of the vitamin that our bodies actually use for daily immunologic and visual and growth functions, it was 12 to 1, which was the best guesstimate that we had back in 2003 for all these crops. But if you see the orange bars, they are describing the beta-carotene to retinol ratio for the crops that have been deployed. And so for cassava, sweet and maize, we see that the conversion ratio is much more efficient. It's not 12 molecules of beta-carotene to 1 of retinol. It's, for maize, it's between 3 and 6 to 1. And for cassava, it's around 5, 6 molecules to 1. So the conversion ratio or the bioavailability of the provitamin A in these crops is higher than or better than we had initially assumed, and so that's a good sign. If you compare with the green bars, which are representative of the bioconversion one can expect from green leafy vegetables, processed, like blended, like the Indian spinach example, or just boiled, like the green leafy veg above, then it's in general better, except for sweet potato, which is around 12 or 13 to 1. For minerals, it is really different because the matrix of the food that carry the minerals, like the beans, the pearl millet, all of these cereals and legumes, is much more complex than for the more starchy crops that carry the provitamin A that we just saw. So in general, what you can see in this graphic, in this bar chart, is that the percent of the zinc and the iron absorbed from these crops when biofortified crops are tested is a little lower than the non-biofortified crops. So let's say for beans, women in Rwanda would absorb from 3 to 6 to 9% of the iron in the beans compared to 6 to 10% absorbed from the non-biofortified beans. So the difference is only significant for the beans and not significant for the other crops when it comes to zinc and iron absorption. And what does that mean? That even though the fraction of the mineral that is absorbed is a little lower for biofortified crops because they have more content, the absolute amount absorbed from the biofortified crops is higher, and therefore would result in better nutritional status for these nutrients in the longer run. So that's what we can see in this example, which is Zambian children who were fed maize meal, which was produced with hammer mills, so that the zinc wouldn't be lost during the milling process. And the absorption of the zinc from this maize meal, and this is a study by the University of Colorado, Denver, Krebs and Hamish group, provides the entire zinc requirement for children of this age when consumed as a porridge, as it was in this bioavailability study. So maize, even maize, which has a lot of phytate, which is a known inhibitor of zinc absorption, can provide enough zinc way above the 25% that we saw for our targets for the other cereals. And there are similar examples for bean iron, for wheat zinc, and the only mineral crop for which we don't have we do have one example is zinc rice. University of Wageningen did a study published this year where they show the same results. So 25% versus 20% absorption between the biofortified and non-biofortified cultivars. So given that the levels are there and that there is enough nutrient that is bioavailable after cooking and processing, will the consumption of these varieties or these biofortified crops generate a measurable change in nutritional status in the groups that we are interested in? And so for that, we conduct efficacy trials, which are randomized clinical or community intervention trials. And we have done or commissioned 12 trials that have been completed, except, they have all been completed, and now we're moving on to multiple crop trials. And so for high iron crops, the trials have been finished for beans and pearl millet, and rice was only a proof of concept trial because the levels of iron in rice are really low. For provitamin A crops, cassava, maize, and sweet potato, well, I'm assuming you know the story of sweet potato, that the cycle of research has gone from bioconversion to retention to efficacy and even effectiveness trials. And the latest publication that, on this topic comes from the study done in Uganda with 20,000 households. It was an effectiveness trial, and colleagues from IFPRI did a secondary analysis of the incidence of diarrhea among the children that are still consuming the sweet potato, well, morbidity in general, and those households where the children are not consuming the sweet potato. And they found a significant reduction in frequency and duration of diarrhea episodes in children under 3 and under 5 who were still consuming sweet potato on a regular basis, orange sweet potato, in these Ugandan households. So that's an added benefit that we really didn't expect. But some people say we got lucky, because even with supplements, you don't see an impact on morbidity at times. So vitamin A crops, sweet potato is a success story with a full cycle of studies completed. With maize, we've completed 3 efficacy trials, and we have results for 2 of them. One showing an increase in vitamin A stores, the other one, which only used serum retinol, didn't produce positive results nor negative results, because serum retinol is just a bad biomarker for interventions that are food-based. Even for supplement-based interventions, serum retinol is not a good biomarker, especially in conditions of inflammation, infection like those you see in African and Latin American or Asian countries, and these studies were done in Zambia. And for cassava, there's one trial that was completed by Elise Talsma in Wageningen. She did this in Kenya, and she showed a very modest increase in serum retinol among the school children. So for provitamin A, we have a lot of good news, even with crops like maize and cassava that don't have the full target level yet. So cassava, the cassava that was used in Kenya only had 7 ppm instead of 15 of beta-carotene, and the maize used in Zambia had the 13 or 14 ppm, so it was almost there. So we're going to look at a few of the 2 latest iron studies that either have been published or, in the case of beans, are accepted for publication by the Journal of Nutrition, but hasn't been published yet. So the study with biofortified pearl millet, which has higher iron content, about 30 parts per million higher than the, more than 30 parts, 50 parts per million higher than the conventional variety that it was compared to. So the feeding of this pearl millet to the school children in Maharashtra gave the children about 14 milligrams more iron than the control, which was consuming flatbread made out of conventional pearl millet. And this exceeded the recommended daily intake, but not to the upper limit level, but it was more than the average recommendation for the children in that group. So what happened after 4 months of consuming the high iron pearl millet? You can see here the markers in the blood. So hemoglobin, which shows the function of iron in the transport of oxygen throughout the body. Ferritin, which shows how much storage iron your body was able to get from that source. Transferrin receptors, which is the third one from your left to the right, is an indicator of how much iron is available in the tissues for enzymes and that type of metabolic function. And body iron is a composite, it's an index produced or calculated using ferritin and transferrin receptor. So all of the indicators went in the right direction with significant statistical significance for ferritin and for total body iron. Hemoglobin didn't increase significantly, probably because the children didn't have, those that were anemic had other causes of the anemia, not just iron deficiency. But we saw all the specific iron biomarkers go in the right direction and with statistical significance. But And so what happened to the prevalence of iron deficiency, which is what public health is interested in anemia prevalence or iron deficiency prevalence? Well, we saw it go down by about 50% in the group of children that were low in iron to begin with and received the high iron pearl millet for 4.5 months. So you reduce the incidence prevalence of iron deficiency by about 50%, which was very dramatic and has to do with the amount of iron they were consuming every day. But going beyond what the blood markers can tell you as a policymaker or as an advisor, how do you translate this to what's important for your population? Well, so iron biomarkers improved, so what? Well, we also, researchers from Cornell also measured energy efficiency, the efficiency with which the study subjects or the children in this case used the energy that they were spending doing normal daily activities. And you can see that the group that improved its iron status also improved the efficiency with which they used the energy. And this was done measuring oxygen in standardized activities. And so this was great finding. So if your population has better efficiency in energy use, then they have greater capacity to do physical labor, exercise, so muscular work is more efficient, and therefore the potential for generating income doing other things after you finish your chores in agriculture or hard physical labor, that extra time you can use for other activities in the household or in productive labor. And going beyond this indicator of capacity to do work, we also measured cognitive performance. So what happened to the children, the school children's ability to solve problems. And so some functions of cognitive functions that are related to the areas in the brain where the iron and the neurotransmitters that use iron concentrate were tested, and the researchers from Penn State University, Laura Murray-Kolb, she found that there was improvement in the attentional function of these children. So they could solve, what this means is they had a faster reaction time, and they made faster go, no-go decisions based on how they solve problems on computers, which they were trained to use to measure this. And so improvements in biomarkers, improvements in cognitive performance, and in physical energy efficiency. And then we have the iron beam study in Rwanda University women, a randomized controlled trial. But in this population, 70% of the women were iron deficient and about 40% were anemic at the beginning. All the iron biomarkers moved in the right direction. Even hemoglobin went up because there were a lot of iron deficient women to begin with. And the results in biomarkers were even better for this sample of population of women of childbearing age. The previous one was school children of both sexes. And Cornell University doctoral student also evaluated activity patterns, and she found that women who received the high iron beam and improved their iron status, they dedicated less time to doing nothing. Right? So sedentary activity means doing nothing. So they dedicated less time to being sedentary, which by almost 100 minutes different with the control group. So that means that they are more active during the day, but so they have less propensity to gain weight, and they probably are engaged in productive activities. And we also evaluated the cognitive performance sphere, and we also found that attention and memory tasks were improved in the women whose iron status improved after, this case was 6 months of bean consumption. So given all this evidence, the biofortified crops for iron, provitamin A, we don't know yet for zinc, are efficacious. Will the farmers adopt them when they are offered these crops? And so I guess these results are a testament to the fact that farmers are adopting them. So so far, just up to in 2015, 2 million households were reached with seeds or planting material of the crops that have been released by their National Agricultural Research System. And mostly this has been at because of the provitamin A crops and high iron beans. We expect during 2016 to double this number of households to 4 million. But this is only in the 7 target countries where we have country offices. But the release of biofortified crop varieties has gone beyond what we as a program do. And so countries are releasing them on their own. And we are helping just corroborate the concentration of minerals to make sure they are biofortified, which means at least 50% more than the concentration of nutrients that the conventional varieties have. So more than 30 varieties released of all of these different crops last year, which means that we have moved from this original target countries and 1 crop per country basically to many more countries and many other crops, even secondary crops which are not really staple crops. So now we're still working with the national breeding programs and the CG centers with the crops you see depicted below, so musa, banana, plantain, Irish potato, cowpea, lentils. And so, the distribution effort continues through public-private collaborations, NGO collaboration, the national seed distribution system, whatever is there that can be strengthened or used is used. So what's next? Well, we have to mainstream biofortification so that we can at least get close to our aspirational goals, which are here. So by 2020, we want to have reached 100 million people. So far, we have only reached 2 times 5, about 10 million people. And we want to have biofortified crops in the 9 target countries plus 23 partnership countries, which means countries where we don't deliver, but other agencies, organizations do the delivery. Oh, that's my own alarm. Okay, so this is what we have to concentrate on from now on. So mainstreaming biofortification, enhancing knowledge, and the enabling technologies to speed up the breeding programs, to continue to develop the next waves of release varieties, which will contain the 100% of the target level. And from the nutritional point of view, we have to improve the bioavailability of the iron and the zinc in some of the crops. That means reducing anti-nutrients and increasing promoters of absorption. And also we think it's necessary to work on the improving of the stability of the provitamin A in the crops. And of course, none of this would be available without the collaboration of many international research and national research centers like the ones depicted here, the CG centers particularly. So, thank you very much. I know you're sleepy, but there's one.
Can you comment on strategies for stacking traits?
Okay, so the stacking of traits, it's something we haven't invested very much on, but it is the closest thing to multiple nutrient fortification. So far, there has been no successful example of stacking multiple traits from the transformation efforts that are going on. It didn't work for banana, but they are working on the concept. It didn't work for sorghum very well. So in the end, they ended up reducing the anti-nutrients and enhancing the promoters, but not increasing the actual iron concentration. So it has proven to be a longer than thought process. Initially, it was offered as something that would accelerate the development of crops that would have multiple micronutrients in them, but so far we haven't seen any results. And except for the cereals and legumes, that whenever you increase the iron levels or the zinc levels, you see the other mineral go up in the same direction. But with the genetic transformation, the gene stacking, we haven't seen any promising results so far that we can take to the field. Yeah. More question?
To reach these numbers of penetration, you're going to have to significantly increase seed supply. At Nestle, we're really interested in biofortified crops, and we've started to use it in all family cereals, vitamin A-rich maize in Nigeria. But we bought all the maize that was available on the open market, and it was only really a few, about 100 tons was available. And we'd like to increase this further, and we think that this would create a commercial pool that would encourage more farmers to grow it and start the ball rolling even more. So what is your strategy in terms of encouraging seed supply?
Well, like you started to say, we have to work both with push and pull strategies to promote the generation of more seed supply. This happened in Nigeria because, but it also happened in Zambia, where maize was a target crop. In Nigeria, it happened partly because the release went out without very much previous notice. It was just released. But in Zambia, where we knew when it was going to be released and the other varieties would come along, we also have supply problems. And so, yes, we have a lot of work to do, but that means mobilizing resources from within the country and from within the bilaterals and anybody who's into seed production, because in the end, these products have to become property of the countries and organizations that are there. So we are helping, but we never thought that it was going to take up so much, and so now we, like you say, we have to work harder at remobilizing resources to create more seed supply. For beans, for example, this hasn't been a problem. The WFP is buying beans from the programs in Rwanda, for instance. And beans just, I guess they have a higher yield per seed than the other crops. So there we're doing fine, but yeah, that's a great comment, and it's very true.
What do you think are the adoption challenges for orange maize?
Well, for any variety that has a visible change in trait, a trait that is visible, like the change in color. First, we thought that the color orange was going to be associated with the second, with the yellow maize, which was not very well accepted in Africa for humans, because it's seen as a food aid leftover kind of thing that they were being given. But the acceptability studies that were done in Zambia and Ghana proved that the color wasn't a problem once people knew that it was orange. I mean, orange and yellow are not the same, and that the orange was associated with better nutrition. And because of the extensive work that UNICEF, WHO have done and the countries have done in Africa with promoting vitamin A capsules and vitamin A, as a nutrition intervention, then people understand, and once they understand the additional nutritional value, they have no problem. The yield is not as good as the commercial hybrids, especially those from the big companies. And so that's another constraint that our offices in Zambia and Zimbabwe are facing. So we have to come up with hybrids, orange hybrids, and that that are competitive, so that people will buy them. And the other one was to motivate millers to pull the demand by purchasing orange maize, and actually that's happening in Zambia, and people are buying the yellow maize meal, off the shelves, and so color is one thing that we thought was going to be a problem, but it's not. Yield is more of a problem, and seed supply is the other thing that we're struggling with. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.